Welcome to A Bunch of Therapists.
The podcast that goes behind the doors of the therapy room.
Our guests will be sharing their experiences of counselling and psychotherapy.
And all the lessons they've learned on the journey through life. This episode is hosted by me, Dipti Solanki. Today's guest is psychotherapist and CEO of the Awareness Centre, Michaela McCarthy. Hi Michaela, it's really good to be here with you today. This time you get to tell us all about what brought you into therapy and your really rather unique and interesting journey.
So, I have many stories within a story. I think for me, I went into therapy before I trained as a therapist. And I remember going into therapy and I thought I had one issue. So I had addiction issues. So I went in with that issue. I think, now I know being a therapist that the issue that you go in with gets you into the room. So I used to be a smoker at the time. So I went into therapy, didn't have an idea really what was going on. And I came out of that session and I just thought, oh my gosh, I've got about 25 issues here. Loads of issues. I just unravelled. And so it made me more curious to go back. And I stayed with that therapist, I think, for about 4 years.
That point at which you went in thinking you had this one issue, you just had to sort that out, and then you thought that would make sense.
Yeah.
Coming out, realising actually there's all these other things that you hadn't even perhaps considered. What did that feel like for you? Was it a case of this makes so much sense, or was it something else?
Well, for me, I lit up a cigarette. I mean, I don't smoke now, but I used to smoke, and I lit up a cigarette and just sort of pondered on the idea of what all this is about. I don't know what I felt, really, even reflecting, but I think when I reflect back, I think I was numb. And I think therapy for me and mental health was in my life from quite a young age. When I was young, my mum, beautiful woman, to look at. She did take care of herself, but when she was unwell, she didn't. And she suffered terribly with clinical depression. Well, she got sectioned, and I was about 7.
Wow.
And I remember sitting, and I knew it was for people that were unwell. And I knew it wasn't physical, and I knew it was, I didn't have a word for it, but I knew that she was unwell mentally. I don't know if I used that term. And she was behind a curtain, and I was just listening, and I thought, oh, this doctor, okay, he's a psychiatrist, and my father was there, and I just thought, like, wouldn't it be amazing to train as a psychiatrist and work with people with their mind?
And you were 7 at this point?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it stayed with me because I couldn't reach my mum when she was sick in that way, that she wasn't in contact.
Right.
With me over the years learning it wasn't consistent, so sometimes she'd be there, sometimes she wasn't there, and that's what I learned over the years for me being around strong women is really important to me. I've been very fortunate to have therapists who are strong women, and I think because I desperately wanted my mum to be strong. And she would tell me these things that were really important, that she wanted me to be independent, do all the things that she struggled to do.
So she had the sense of what a strong woman
she wanted,
and what she wanted.
Yeah, and she was really clear, about knowing myself, don't make the same mistakes as what she's made, be independent. And she found it really, really difficult to be independent. She was very dependent. I'm not saying it's been the best thing to do because I am independent, but I think for me, when I went into therapy, I was very fortunate, as I say, I found some really good therapists. I did work with a male therapist who was really good, but I met strong women.
Right.
And I think what that gave me was the scripts that my mum was trying to tell me on how to be, that these women were able to process that with me.
Right. That's so powerful.
I know. And I just didn't have a place, what she was telling me, I didn't have a place. I didn't have anyone who I could see, who could show me.
Right.
And I remember once a therapist saying to me that you need to take the little girl by the hand and take her with you. And I didn't really kind of understand it, but I did. So then I did, because I thought, well, actually, it's the little person who's scared, who's anxious, all these things, but I'm doing all this adult stuff, but I'm disconnected.
Knowing Mum was there, having a sense that there was something other than something physically wrong with her, but not being able to reach her. Can you talk a bit more about that and how that might feel, how that felt for you, but also how that must feel for other people when they have a loved one who's experiencing difficulties with their mental health and, the frustrations, the sadness, all of that goes along with that.
So with my parents, my father always seemed to be the strong one, but he had addiction issues. He was an alcoholic at the time, but was still able to maintain some sense of, he had a business and stuff. So he seemed strong and my mum seemed weak. So that's how I split them. So I thought, well, actually, and I remember being in therapy with a male therapist, actually. And I said to him, growing up, I felt, I've got two options here. My father's life seemed really more exciting and my mother's life didn't. So I'm not going to go for the clinical depression. I think I'll go for addiction. It seems more fun.
You remember making a conscious choice?
It was kind of some decision I made.
Wow.
And I remember sharing that with him. So actually, at the journey of therapy, so I went into therapy. I stopped therapy about 18 months ago. I thought I'd see what it might be like. So I was in therapy for 27 years, literally back to back.
Wow.
Only missed times when I was on holiday, if I was sick. And then I had 10 years of group therapy, throwing in a few spiritual programs. That's what I say to people, And it did take me, I think, 8 years to actually feel empathy. Because when I first turned up to the training, I thought, why are all these people crying and everything? I was just numb.
When you started your therapy training?
I was just numb, and I'd been in therapy 4 years.
Right.
And I just thought, well, why, you just turn up to train to be a therapist, right?
What was your view on the people that were crying and feeling what they were feeling?
I just quite liked being there. In an odd way, I thought, well, I like being here because actually I'm learning. I'm sure I'll defrost at some point, And I'd stopped taking, when I started training, I stopped taking drugs. And I did stop drinking. I do drink today, but very small. So that's what it was. I went on a journey and I didn't think I knew enough. So I trained as a counsellor, trained as a psychotherapist, eventually trained as a psychosexual relationship therapist, I just kept going on until oh my gosh, a lot of essays.
Yeah, but so much wonderful training.
Yeah. And meeting fantastic people.
Did you think while you were doing the training, you were waiting for that point where you felt you knew it all? I don't know. What was the thing that you were waiting for, that readiness?
I have no idea.
Right.
I just thought, you just know when you know.
Yeah. I think a lot of people listening in will understand that because it's going to be different for all of us.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't really, I suppose I didn't overthink it too much. I just thought I was more into, I think for me to become the person that I am today was the development.
Right.
I need to develop here.
Right.
And I don't know when I'm going to be developed.
Yeah.
I don't know when I'm going to be right, but I'll just keep going. And that's what I kept doing.
Yeah.
I just kept going. And I embraced it. I was so curious. It reminds me of when I used to be young, out on a bike ride, and I'd go out, look out to the sky. This is all the newness that I was experiencing. And there was so much to learn. And then I set up private practice.
Yeah.
And then I was still training, even though I'd set up private practice as a psychotherapist. And I remember speaking to a supervisor and I said, oh, do you know what? It'd be really good to set up a centre and everything's all under one roof. Do you know what I mean? Because I said, I've spent most of my time going to this placement there, that one over there, this one there, that training there. And I never went to see therapists really that were local to me. I think one, just all over the place because it was all recommendation. And then I remember being with him, and he said, "What are you going to call this centre?" I said, "Well, it's got to be the something centre." And he said, well, and he was a Gestalt therapist, and he said, "Why don't you call it Awareness Centre?" I went, "Yeah, that's brilliant." And then how I found the building in Clapham was that I had a hairdresser down in Brixton, and she was moving to Australia. So I thought, right, I've got to get a new hairdresser. And so I went down to Abbeville Road in Clapham, and I went into this salon, and I just went with a hairdresser to get my hair done. But I knew the guy that leased the building, and he said, "Oh, I've got my bipolar, it's terrible." He said, "You wouldn't take the upstairs off me," because he said, "You told me you're looking for a centre." He said, "I can't cope, I just can't." I said, "Yeah, sure." And then 4 months later, he said, "You want to take the downstairs off me?" I mean, that is just how it happened. Yeah. And so from there, it developed, and we've now got 3 NHS contracts that we run the counselling service, and we do a really good job. And I've probably got high standards, but not in a high standards way, but I just want people to be able to get a really good service in the NHS, as well as if you can afford private or whatever, you know. And so for me, we work at it daily.
But there's also the other part that is Michaela, the therapist.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've got your clients that work with you. So tell me a bit more about the kind of therapy you practice, and what the experience of being in private practice is like for you.
Well, I've worked in different places. I've worked in Citibank. I worked in the West End. I had a private practice from a consultant room at home for about, 18 years maybe. And I've had all sorts of people come to see me. And I think it's different stages when I've grown and different approaches that I was learning. And I used to work a lot more with people with addiction issues. I tend not to so much now. Then I trained as a psychosexual relationship therapist, and I was working with a lot of couples.
So let a lot of people go, what is a psychosexual therapist? Tell us all what a psychosexual therapist is.
It's looking at, your own sexuality, your own psychosexual issues. But I was more, I suppose, being a psychotherapist, I just wanted to, I actually went in because I wanted to work with sex addiction, but then I realised that actually you need to be working in addiction, which I was, and then be able to work with sex addiction. And so I went through stages of working with people's sex addiction issues. And then I sort of...
But that's not the only reason someone would see a psychosexual therapist, right?
No, it's, looking at, many issues around that. Their own sexuality, their own sexual preferences, everything. What does it mean? So,
how would a couple know if they need to come to therapy?
Well, I think when they get to a stage where, in my experience, that they need to do something, otherwise they're not going to survive. Where I think actually it's probably better to go into therapy sooner. I think most people catch themselves just in time. I think I've only met 2 couples that actually it was just, it wasn't going to happen. And, I've worked with same-sex couples. For me, people are people as well. You just got to understand how their unit works, how they work, and then they share that with me, and what doesn't work, and what do they want to change. I only work with 8 people now, or 8 cases, because, again, it's time. And it's enough for me. I don't want to be a person who runs an organisation where they don't work with clients, because I think when you work with clients, it kind of keeps you, grounded a bit, but it keeps you quite raw, within the work. It feel like being a chef and not cook.
So working with couples, I imagine, is a very different experience to working with people on a one-to-one. Can you tell me a bit more about that, and our listeners who might be curious about how that works?
Yeah, so for me, and I'm saying for me because I'm sure other therapists work differently, but for me, working with an individual, it's about your relationship with you and the individual, okay, and what you co-create together. But then when you have a couple in the mix, you need to be mindful. It's not I like that one better than the other one. It's actually working with them more as a unit, and
as you say, figuring out first how their unit works.
Yeah, so they tell me about I'm very interested in their stories of how they come together. So their childhood, and how they met, and what do they bring into the relationship, what they did in their own families, and what works and what doesn't work. And we sort of get to that. But a lot of when they come in, the bits that they liked about each other, they find it hard to remember. Right. And the bits that they didn't like about each other actually come to the forefront a bit more. And so we look at that, and the key is communication. Right. Okay, that is real key.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to hear, what was your favourite therapy moment?
You mean as a therapist?
Yeah.
I can't. It's just so, I've been working for such a long time. I think it's hard to just pick out one. For me, the more I do it, the more I keep going, the more I grow, the better I've become.
So, just in conclusion, what would you say to someone who is therapy curious, who's kind of been eyeing it but steps away, not quite sure what to expect? What would you say to that person?
I would say to that person, you take the little person by the hand and you bring them along for the journey with you.
Right.
Because I tell you what, it's been worth it for me.
I love that. That hits deep. We've all got that inner child that needs a lot of love, a lot of care, a lot of attention, and to be listened to as well. And if not us, who's going to do that? So.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful for the people that have been in my life in this journey.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to A Bunch of Therapists with Michaela McCarthy and Dipti Solanki. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on our socials to keep updated. Until next time, bye!